I feel like I've been noticing a bit of a trend while searching for my next potential city on my little digital nomad escapade. I've been looking at places like Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, and more or less every other major nomad hub in Southeast Asia. And something that I've noticed in all of these places is that they're all starting to cost more or less the same. Now, I am certainly not the only one to have noticed this trend as well. In fact, if you look at the broader online discussion, there seems to be a broad consensus that all of these places are in fact starting to be priced similarly. Now, why is that? Well, I believe it's because all of these places are starting to target the same type of person with their rentals, with their pricing, and what they offer. And now as we explore a bit deeper in this video what exactly the archetype is of the modern digital nomad, we're going to find out if that modern nomad is in fact more of a remote worker, an immigrant, an economic refugee, or a migrant, whatever you want to call them nowadays. This one person for whom everyone seems to be building all of their rentals, their co-working space, and all of their cafes for. They're offering these entire lifestyles for this one person. But do they even truly exist anymore? Let's actually take a look into this. Now, this cost convergence actually only applies to specific people, and that's because the reality of locals living in a particular city and the expats living there is completely different. Locals and foreigners simply live extremely different economic realities. What I mean is basically that for us, the foreigners, the digital nomads, the remote workers, the expats, the immigrants, the economic refugees, the I'm working on a project crowd, or whatever we seem to be calling ourselves this week. Because the same archetypal lifestyle of a decent apartment, some cafe time, affordable food, a gym, maybe a co-working space. With all of that, you've probably landed somewhere in the ballpark of $1,000 US, give or take. In Kuala Lumpur, in Bangkok, in Ho Chi Minh cities, all wildly different countries, different currencies, yet they all seem to converge around that similar $1,000 price point, specifically in the case of that modern digital nomad lifestyle. A suspiciously similar number in all of these cities at the end of the day. Now let's actually take an in-depth look at this. I'll start off with where I actually am today, which is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. My place in KL is about 500 square feet. Not huge, not centrally located either, which by KL standards just means I'm a bus ride from the action rather than walking distance. But the building has a pool, a gym, 24-hour security, and it's an integrated development, which basically means there are restaurants directly below me and more across the street. I eat out for almost every meal. I take the train or bus half the time, a taxi or a Grab the other half. I don't really think about the price of things day to day, not because I'm rich, but because nothing costs enough to really stress about it. My rent is 2,200 ringgit a month. Food runs me maybe another 300 to 400. Transport another 100 to 200 on top of that. You're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 600 to 700 USD for the basics. And once you add the incidentals, the occasional splurge dinner, a gym supplement, whatever, you're sitting somewhere around $800 to $1,000 a month for a genuinely comfortable life. Not luxury. I want to be clear about that. I'm not in a penthouse. I'm not eating at a hotel restaurant every night, but I can if I want to, occasionally, without it being a financial event. That is the lifestyle I'm talking about. Bangkok, a different country, a different currency, but a roughly similar number once you're looking at the nomad-facing rental market in Ari, Sukhumvit, Siloam, wherever the crowd tends to cluster. Different country, similar number. Ho Chi Minh City, same pattern. Different city, different currency entirely. But once you're filtering for the foreigner-facing rental markets and the cafes with fast Wi-Fi and oat milk lattes, you know the ones, you end up in roughly the same place. Then there's Bali, which is sort of the ghost of Christmas future for all of these cities. Bali went through the exact same process earlier and harder, and it's now sitting at the other end. Canggu is legitimately expensive, not that far off from parts of Europe expensive. Bali is what happens when the process fully completes, and every city on this list is quietly moving in that direction. I'm actually about to head to Da Nang, Vietnam, to find out if the exact same situation holds true there as well. Now, I suspect I already know the answer, and it is going to be most likely yes. It will probably cost, again, around the same figure. But be sure to subscribe as well if you're interested in hearing my authentic take on what life is like in that city as well in the future. So how does this actually work? Different countries, different economies, different currencies, yet all of them converging around the same price point. I'm sure many of you have already started to figure it out while listening to me speak about it. The honest answer is simply gentrification. Now that is not a hot take, and it's not unexpected at all either. Many of you were probably screaming that at the screen throughout the entire video so far. Because of that, I'm not going to spend the next several minutes explaining the exact mechanism for you because you probably already know of it. But bear with me because it is something that is worth explaining a little bit. These are major cities: KL, Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City. They were never undiscovered hidden gems. What happens is more specific than that. A foreigner economy starts growing alongside the existing local one. And once it takes root, the logic is pretty straightforward. Landlords notice that foreigners will pay 3 times what locals pay for the exact same apartment if you put Nomad ready or remote work ready in the listing and install a Western toilet. Cafes figure out they can charge Scandinavian prices for coffee if they have exposed brick and a light jazz playlist. Co-working spaces open aimed precisely at that crowd. Co-living places appear. Airbnb listings multiply. Gradually, a second economy forms on top of the original one, and it's not priced around local wages. It's priced around what a foreign remote worker is perceived to be willing to pay. And that perception is the key part I want to emphasize here. The idea that a foreigner can pay that price and is willing to pay it for some of the comforts of home, just relocated somewhere warmer and what they thought would be cheaper. Here's where the convergence comes in. Because all of these cities are roughly competing for the exact same pool of foreigners, they all end up pricing roughly towards the same price ceiling. Similar amenities, similar pricing, for similar people. So let's talk about who that actual person is. Just who is the ideal customer that all of these cities is actually trying to attract. The original pitch for digital nomadism was pretty clear. You guys are probably all familiar with it. The American tech worker on a USD salary, laptop on the beach, smoothie in hand, Slack notifications silenced, living a better life abroad than they ever could at home. Now this person absolutely still exists. I'm not saying that they don't, but in my opinion, they are more rare than ever before. But I would argue that that type of person is increasingly not representative of what the average modern digital nomad experience actually is, especially post-COVID. In my last video, Moving to Asia Won't Save You, check it out by the way, I talked about the rise of the phenomenon of the Western economic refugee, which by the way, I absolutely consider myself to be one of. And the comments on that video were, let's say, lively. I think that's because I touched on something uncomfortable and real that a lot of people living, advertising, or advocating for the digital nomad lifestyle don't really like to reflect on. Because more and more, I believe this lifestyle is less about glamorous financial freedom and more about actual economic survival. Especially if you're a younger person coming from a Western country, where, frankly, life back home is largely untenable. The argument was this: more and more people aren't moving to Southeast Asia because they're financially free and want to take it easy. Rather, they're moving because staying home stopped making sense. I personally left Berlin at the end of last year for exactly that reason. Not because I feel Europe is collapsing, I've made that point already and I'm not going to repeat the whole sermon, but because I took an honest look at the trajectory, did the math, and realized it was not working. And if you're somebody with the willingness to try something new, maybe a little recklessness, and the ability to actually pick up and go, Southeast Asia starts to look less like an adventure and more like a rational bid for a better future. A lot of people in those comments recognize that feeling immediately, which tells you something about who is actually making these moves. And it's not just anecdotes. There is a well-documented phenomenon of broke foreigners living in Southeast Asia, and Bangkok more specifically. Again, it always is Bangkok. Not student backpackers running low on a gap year, but people who have been living there for months or years, quietly running out of money, borrowing from other expats, not finding success with their online courses, and eventually turning up with empty pockets at embassies or simply living on the streets. There's a reason post-Thailand depression is a phrase you hear more commonly now, especially on social media, and I find that anyone who has genuinely spent a real amount of time in these countries and made those steps for themselves will understand the truth of that. I count myself as part of that picture. I did not move to Kuala Lumpur because I'm swimming in money, but rather because the alternative stopped making sense. That puts me somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, and I think it allows me to give a perspective of what the honest reality of the modern digital nomad experience is in 2026. I don't believe it's as flashy as what gets promoted. Most people I find are probably a lot closer to the economic refugee end of the spectrum than they would care to admit. For those people, the economic arbitrage is very much real, and the lifestyle upgrade is definitely significant and tangible. I'm personally experiencing exactly that. But again, the margin is thinner than the marketing would suggest. And the market for the exact type of person who could afford all the glamour that was previously associated with a lifestyle like this simply does not exist as much anymore. That market is also shrinking. So here's where all of this leaves us. Southeast Asia is still considerably cheaper than living in the West. That is true. That is undoubtedly true. I myself am living some version of that right now. And for a lot of people, moving here undoubtedly increases their life quality, financially or otherwise. But the polished version of this lifestyle, the nice condo, the rooftop pool, the international brunch spots, the super co-working spaces, and the curated expat social scene. All of those things simply are not priced for the person who is escaping the economic reality back home. That version of this experience is absolutely not priced around the type of person who is escaping the cost of living crisis back home. It's all priced around the older, pre-COVID era of the digital nomad, the one with a considerable Western-sourced income and lots to spare. Now, I find that the modern reality of the digital nomad increasingly does not fit that description. So the real question is no longer, is Southeast Asia cheap? It is, but for who is it actually still cheap for? Because the answer to that question has quietly shifted throughout the years, and the marketing has not caught up yet. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe because it goes a long way to support me and keep me going with making this type of content. Take care.